I built Santa Claus in dominoes, and it was one of my most difficult projects yet. You ready to see it topple? What's up, Domino community, and I am so excited to share my entire process as I built Santa Claus in dominoes. And I gotta say, this was an incredibly complex build, like one of the most challenging ones I've ever done, just because it was pretty much entirely free-handed. Every single piece was placed individually by hand. It was quite a challenge. So I wanted to make a really fun Christmas domino video, and Santa, of course, is just an iconic character. So I started looking up some images of Santa to see how I could build him in dominoes, and I was really inspired by these images of Santa coming out from a chimney. Like maybe he's like half in it and his hands are going up and you see like a starry background in the night sky, like something that could be really cool and fun and also be able to showcase Santa in a really prominent way. So I started making an outline of Santa using flat dominoes, and this really helps me to kind of trace out how large Santa is going to be before I start building it. So I'm just getting an idea of where everything should be placed so I can shape out and kind of draw Santa in dominoes. Once I had a rough outline, I was able to then go ahead and start building dominoes on top of it. The reason I wanted to make this all freestyled was because I really just didn't feel like building a big field. You know, having all the dominoes on a grid seemed too easy in a way. So using the natural geometry of Santa's face, like segmenting the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the hat, the beard, like all the parts of the image, I wanted to see if I could make it topple in different sections, one after the next, in different directions, rather than just one direction like a standard field. So starting with the nose, I wanted to make it in a spiral and see if I could kind of fill in the entire nose in a spiral. But filling in an entire circle using a spiral was actually quite challenging, because once you get to the center of the circle, you end up having this like large gap. So I ended up using the tape trick to sort of make it turn on a super sharp angle to be able to fill all the space within the nose. And I also use the same technique for the eyes, except instead of a full circle, it's sort of like a U-turn that kind of switches back and forth. After I built the eyes, I started moving on to building the mustache. And I love the idea of the mustache toppling from the inside and going outwards. Another challenge I ran into was trying to separate the mustache from the beard, because they're both white and they would blend in if I built them right next to each other. So I added this gray domino line on the bottom of the mustache that sort of acts as a shadow, and it will also separate the beard from the mustache. Now, making the mouth was really challenging. I had a lot of trouble trying to make the right kind of smile. I don't know, it felt like it was kind of looking a bit robotic, so I changed the shape a couple of times and then changed how I made the teeth as well. I'm actually not a huge fan of how I put the dominoes flat on top to make the teeth, but this was the only way that I could fit those white dominoes, unfortunately. I definitely learned from this, and next time I will try to incorporate the teeth more within like an actual domino field. I don't know if you can tell from the overhead view, but the way this topples is incredibly complex. So it starts on the bottom. The mouth topples right to left, which then triggers the nose spiral, which will then trigger the mustache on either side to topple, and then knock down the ivory dominoes around the eye to go around in a U-turn, and then it tape tricks back around to do the rest of the eye in these like rings. This is gonna be super risky. I'm actually not sure if this is gonna work, but I think it's worth it for the art and for the challenge. Building Santa's hat was a lot easier. I split it up into two parts so that the bottom white section will fall, and then afterwards the red section of the whole hat will topple with the pom-pom. And again here, I used the tape trick to switch it back on a really sharp angle. And I love using this trick because it allows you to make a super sharp corner without making a full domino line. And I really wanted to avoid having, you know, clear dominoes come out from the side, but it kind of tested how dense I can make a domino project and connect it all from one to the next. And then it was finally time to make Santa's beard. Similarly with the mustache, I sort of had this calling where the beard had to fall from top to bottom. Like, that's just the way that the hair of the beard kind of naturally falls down. And I very easily could have just used a template for the beard, but I wanted to go with the natural kind of state of hair. Like, when hair just naturally lays, it's not perfect. So I built it all by hand on purpose so that it wouldn't be so perfect. Like, artistically, I'm kind of challenging myself to make things not perfect on purpose. And this was a great example of how that kind of works. So after I finished building Santa's face, it was time to move on to make the body. And I realized that I actually needed to make Santa a little fatter. He was looking kind of skinny, you know? So I realigned the domino shape and then started building the belt. The build was big enough that I could make the belt 5 dominoes wide. And that was perfect to sort of make the inner clasp of the belt. So I wanted to separate the belt and the arms of Santa so they would fall separately. I don't know, something about it, I just really felt like the arms needed to topple at the same time, kind of symmetrically going out. Again, I used the tape trick so that the left side could topple at the same time as the right side. And I made the mistake of building the entire right arm before I measured the left arm, because only afterward I realized that the right arm was not the right size. It should have been a lot skinnier. So I had to kind of do a bit of surgery here and change the dominoes and their placement to match the left side of the arm. And then to add a little bit of color and some fun to the image, I added a green gift. It seemed like it needed something to contrast the red, and having something green kind of like tied in the whole Christmas theme and just makes it a little bit more fun. And then finally, the most difficult part of the project was complete. So this is Santa Claus and dominoes, and next it was just time to build the background. I wanted to make a really cool nighttime scene where it's kind of like snowing in the background and you see the moon and some stars. I was inspired by a project that I made almost a decade ago called Arms Wide Open. It starts with this person toppling in the middle, and then on either side at the same time, the background kind of flows in towards the center. And I wanted to make something like this, but on a much larger scale. And this time I played around a lot more with the flowing lines. If this is a blizzard or, I don't know, like a starry night scene, the dominoes they don't need to be perfect. It should be very freestyled. It should be very organic. Lots of flowing lines going in all sorts of directions. So I used 3 main colors: neon blue, blue, and purple, and then sprinkled in a doubled white domino to make snow every couple of dominoes. And I think this made a really cool pattern, and I loved adding different swirls and different squiggle lines and branch offs and diamonds to kind of connect it all together. This was one of my favorite parts to build in the project, just because it's kind of mindless in a way, yet at the same time I do need to pay attention to where every domino needs to be placed. The thing about freehanded stuff, it's like you can start building a line anywhere, and based off of that line, that determines where the next line will go, just based off of how much space you've taken up and where the line is toppling. I kind of look at this as process of elimination. Like, okay, if I build this line here, then obviously the next line has to go here to take up this space, and then once it becomes more crowded, then there's only one spot left for a line to go here. Like, the main goal is to just fill as much space as possible, while at the same time not making it too dense, because that could hinder how it falls, and I didn't want dominoes to be toppling and triggering rows of dominoes next to it by accident. One of the reasons why I love making freestyle projects is because it really makes me think. I have to think about every single domino and where exactly it's going to land once it topples over. Of course, I had to build a crescent moon that just goes right in the top corner over here, and I also built a couple of stars that were twinkling. These were good accents to kind of just put in the middle of the entire background, and I found that having the stars in place really informed where the lines would go around it, because the dominoes have to snake around the sharp angles of the star, and once I had them all in place, it kind of just all made sense where all the dominoes should go. And then I moved on to building the chimney. Now for this part, I did use a template because the brick of the chimney, that actually is perfect. Like, I can't change the size of a brick. And originally I wanted to topple it in sections where each row of brick would fall in one direction and then it would switch back and go in the other direction. But I realized that wouldn't really work, because when you topple over a line, it should shifts it over by a couple of dominoes depending on the direction. And if they're toppling in opposite directions, then the bricks would be misaligned because each brick shares a border line, like this ivory line, with the one that's above or below it. So that wouldn't really work if they were toppling in different directions. Eventually I came to the conclusion that I would just topple it kind of like a normal field, and then from there we can topple Santa. But overall, especially from the overhead camera, I was incredibly happy with how this turned out. As a standalone art piece, this is one of my best pieces of work, I think. Just seeing all the flowing lines around Santa and the stars and the moon and how each individual part of Santa will topple over, it really, to me, is something that I'm very proud of. I was very excited to knock it down. I was just crossing my fingers that this topple would work because it was so risky, especially in Santa's face. There's like so many different sections of dominoes falling in different directions, and I had no idea what was gonna happen, but let's topple this thing. Okay, I gotta break some news. That actually isn't how it toppled. Let's rewind this and play it again for real. No, what happened? You'll see that when the nose topples and triggers the mustache, it accidentally triggers these ivory dominoes on the side to go out and topple in the opposite direction. Now this is a really big problem. Like when dominoes fall on a curve, they tend to slide out more. And I did tape down some one-way dominoes, but not enough. I think I misjudged the spacing and should have added more one-way taped dominoes or added a larger gap in between each piece of Santa that was going to fall. So unfortunately, the domino effect stopped before it was able to reach the right eye, which luckily we were able to edit. So yay, shout out to my editor Tim, he did a great job. Anyways, let's knock it down again. So I got this long skinny rod, I'm gonna use this to topple it. But after that, the whole background felt perfectly. I was really happy about that. Like the entire effect, just taking in the whole image from one point of view was really spectacular. I think that was a nice way to kind of finish off the whole project. All of these lines just toppling at the same time. It kind of makes a big finale. Now, even if there was a full stop in this project, I'm still really proud of it. I think it's important as an artist to once in a while just make something that feels creatively fulfilling. This project definitely did that for me. Like it challenged me in so many ways to make something that was totally freestyled, make something that was really dense. Like it's sort of like an SOS feel, but without the barriers. I just kind of went for it and it was new. It was challenging. It made me think with every single domino. It felt like I needed some time to just make art. Although it didn't work exactly as planned, I learned a lot, and I think this is definitely an experience that's going to help me in my future projects. I do want to try something like this again in the future where I segment different parts of the image to fall in certain ways, but I'm going to leave a lot more space in between and more barriers and really ensure that there's no chance of failure. My question to you is, how do you know when to take risks when you're building a domino project? I'm just curious, like, how do you approach taking risk when it comes to domino projects? If you're curious to hear more about the process of my domino building, I do have a whole playlist of podcast style behind the scenes videos, so you can go check it out over here. I hope you have a wonderful end of the year. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, whatever you celebrate. I hope it's a good one. And lastly, I want to give a shout out to our featured community member, H.A. Topples, who's been making some really cool setups lately, so go check out their channel. And as always, I'm Lily Hevish, and keep on building.